This call is being recorded.
Hey, sorry I'm a little late.
That's all right. How are you, James?
Doing all right. Our recording ran a little long.
No, that is quite all right. Kyle's having technical difficulties right now. His internet went out, and he's the only one that has the capability to get us on air. So he's working on it right now. Right now, it's just you and me.
Oh, okay.
So how's the show going? I other than what we're doing, what we're doing is keeping me pretty busy too. So I haven't really had a chance to tune in to you guys lately.
Oh, it's been going well. I mean, we've actually it's great, but it sucks kind of thing. We've grown a lot as far as our downloads each month since the hiring of Arians. But because that happened out of season, we don't have the usual sponsorships that we do. So we're not making any money off of this massive increase of numbers. But hopefully, these people are sticking around and enjoying what we're doing, and it'll show up, during the NFL season.
Good. Yeah, I think you're getting a good hire in Arians.
Oh yeah,
had a pretty. Yeah, you should be. I mean, I had a pretty close eye on him up here in Pittsburgh. His relationship with Roethlisberger was terrific, and I mean, he just has such a good feel for the offensive game.
Yeah, he really, really does. But yeah, we actually, there's another Buccaneers podcast called the Pewtercast, And every year they do these awards where, credentialed media, fringe media, and select fans get to nominate for each category, and then all these people vote on each category. So we were nominated for Best Buccaneers Podcast. There were over 13,000 votes, and we won Best Bucs Podcast on another podcast award show.
Wow, that's awesome.
We had to laugh because, they were not happy that we beat them.
I wouldn't think.
There's a little bit of a friendly rivalry between the two of us. For them to have to talk about how great we are on their award show was pretty epic.
Well, I mean, at least it sounds like you guys have a decent working relationship with them. I know there's a handful of different Saints podcasts out there that honestly they don't. And this stays between you and I, and Kyle, if you're listening, I know you feel the same way. Obviously, this stays off air, but a lot of us don't speak to each other.
Right.
And it's frustrating. I'm still considered the new kid on the block, which is fine. I'm having fun with it. Well, this is Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz, and we are having some technical difficulties tonight, but we still welcome all of our listeners, of the fans of the NFL, fans of the Bayou Blitz everywhere, welcoming you to another happy Wednesday night. We have a busy night ahead of us. I know the NFL schedule is being released tonight, so we're all excited about that. But even more exciting than that is we continue our roundtable and our steel cage match through the NFC South. And it is my honor to welcome a good friend of ours. Even though we might not like his taste in football teams, he is a wonderful person and a wonderful analyst. Thank you for joining us, James Yarcho of Locked On Bucs podcast. How are you, James?
I am great, and thank you for such a kind introduction.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it's been way too long since we've had either you or David onto our show. In fact, I don't think I've had you on since last preseason when we were talking about the Bucs. So a lot of things have happened with obviously both of our teams in that interim.
Oh yeah, for sure. It seemed like things were looking so great after the beginning of the season. Start off 2-0 against the Saints and the defending champions, and then the wheels fall off. So it is what it is. But all these paths led us to Bruce Arians, who that was a guy I had started with David in my podcast. We had started the hashtag BA to the Bay back in November of 2017. So we've been on this train for a long time, and it's nice to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, no doubt. And I know you and I were talking off the air a little bit. I agree with you. I think Arians is going to be a great hire. He has such a good feel for the offensive game. He's going to bring swagger to that organization for sure. One of the more confident coaches out there, similar in personality type to our own Sean Payton. He's the kind of guy you hate when he's on the other team, but you really feel a sense of camaraderie, when he's part of your guys, and he's going to rally the troops, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what Buccaneers fans are the most anxious and the most excited about is him working with Jameis Winston. Winston is coming off of working with an offensive coordinator and then a head coach that didn't want him, didn't believe in him. When Dirk Cutter was hired under Lovie Smith's regime, he was the last one on the quote-unquote Jameis Winston train. He wanted Mariota. The whole draft process, he kept saying, I want Marcus Mariota to be able to run my offense. And both Jason Light and Lovie Smith, and then, of course, the owners, the Glazer family, they all wanted Jameis. So the entire time that Cutter was working with him, Cutter didn't want him there. He didn't believe in him, didn't want him running the offense. And so there was always kind of some disconnect there. So we saw last season, especially with the implosion in Cincinnati, which I was fortunate enough to be there for. He was looking for any opportunity he could to yank him and get Fitzpatrick back on the field, and then basically was forced to put Jameis back out again, and it never gelled. So to have a head coach like Bruce Arians that has worked with so many different styles of quarterbacks and has always managed to get them to succeed and exceed expectations, to have him work with somebody like Jameis Winston, I've said it on our podcast and I said it on the website over at BucsNation.com. If Bruce Arians can't get Jameis to play at the level that we all believe he's capable of, then there's no head coach possible that can. It's Bruce or bust for Jameis Winston.
Hey, yeah, and I would agree with that, and I agree with you too. I mean, Jameis has shown some wonderful potential through his relatively short career. He just really hasn't been able to sustain it. Now, I apologize, I don't have his Winston's contract in front of me. Is he in his option year right now?
Yes, this is his fifth-year option, and if he performs to the level that we all expect and we all believe that he can, he will actually be the first Buccaneers quarterback ever drafted by the team to earn a second contract.
Wow.
That is that is staggering. I have no words. But
Me neither.
I'm with you though. And obviously we've spoken a lot in the past. Saints fans and Buccaneers fans historically are kind of kindred spirits. We've both been through decades of struggle, decades of frustration. Each franchise has a Super Bowl title and some sustained playoff success through the 2000s as well. But we can certainly relate to each other historically about frustration and everything like that. Now, as far as Winston's weapons on the field, you guys have had a really interesting offseason. You re-signed your offensive tackle, probably your best offensive lineman in Donovan Smith, but you lost a couple of big play receivers. And, your receiving core, in my opinion, was the deepest from top to bottom talent-wise, last year. But you traded Deshaun Jackson to the Eagles, back to the Eagles, and you lost Adam Humphries to the Titans. Do you think that Chris Godwin is ready? I mean, Mike Evans is a superstar. We all know that. But do you think Godwin is ready to take that next step into the level approaching the top echelon of NFL receivers?
There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. Chris Godwin is an unappreciated, undervalued stud. He is absolutely phenomenal. And getting this opportunity, especially, the rumblings right now, and of course we won't really know until we start to see it, but the rumblings right now is that Chris Godwin is going to play that Larry Fitzgerald role in this offense. So he's going to be that guy in the slot, working those mismatches, getting those red zone targets, and basically working his butt off. He's a similar size. He's got incredible hands, deceptive speed, kind of like Mike Evans. When you see Mike Evans run, he doesn't look fast, but his strides are so long that he ends up, being relatively fast. Chris Godwin is kind of that same way. So if he's able to fill that role the way Larry Fitzgerald did and the way Reggie Wayne kind of shifted when Bruce Arians was in Indianapolis, he is going to explode this year.
Yeah, I'll agree. I was a huge Chris Godwin fan when he was at Penn State. I was really keeping my fingers crossed. I watched his film closely too. I was really keeping my fingers crossed that the Saints would end up drafting him. But the Buccaneers have a good one. Now, where do you put you have your starters nailed down. Evans and Godwin, a couple of big physical playmaking type of receivers. What's your depth look like now, and how highly do you think the team will prioritize that position in what I think is a pretty deep receiving core draft?
I think they're definitely going to address wide receiver in the draft, but as you said, it's pretty deep. I think they're going to look for someone to kind of fill that Adam Humphries role, kind of that third down target, that grinder, the short, tough yards. But they also got Brashad Perryman, who wanted out of his verbal agreement with the Browns once they made the trade for Odell Beckham Jr. And, of course, we all know Brashad Perryman was touted pretty highly out of UCF. Disappointing in Baltimore. Struggled with injury in his first season, could never really get the chemistry down with elite Joe Flacco. Goes to Cleveland, had a pretty decent year, with the Browns last year, but that's that speed, deep threat that Bruce is going to like to utilize. You know, and I say Bruce, of course, Bruce is not calling the plays. That is former NFL quarterback Byron Leftwich is the official offensive coordinator. He will be the one calling the plays. But we were fortunate enough. We had Chris Godwin on the podcast a few months ago, and we were fortunate enough to have Brashad Perryman on our show shortly after the agreement with the Bucs, and I'm very excited about his potential because he does have a lot of talent. It's been a matter of overcoming injuries and kind of getting more involved in offenses as he's gotten comfortable. Could he be considered a first-round bust? Absolutely. He hasn't lived up to that hype, but he still has plenty of time left, and now he's in this one-year prove-it deal. So I'm very excited to see what he can do. Outside of that, you're looking at last year's day 3 pick in Justin Watson, who I'm not real high on. Some people are. I personally am not. So you're going to be looking for these guys in the draft that, you know, they may not be the biggest, they may not be the fastest, but they're going to be the grinders that are going to get those tough short yard catches. And you're also going to see something that Bruce Arians has never had in his arsenal, and that's 2 legitimate receiving options at tight end. You still have, you know, Cameron Brate on the roster right now, who we know has a phenomenal chemistry with Jameis Winston, but you also have a freak of nature in O.J. Howard, and we saw what he could do last year up until he got injured. You know, he's going on his 3rd year, and he's had both of his seasons shortened by injury. So the Bucs have to have him stay healthy. But and I'm not trying to just pump him up because he's a Buccaneer. I legitimately believe that, you know, O.J. Howard, if he stays healthy, can be one of the elite tight ends in the NFL. You're talking Travis Kelce, you're talking Zach Ertz, you're talking O.J. Howard. I mean, that's how good he is in all facets, not just receiving and playmaking, but blocking. He is an incredible athlete, and I think he's going to have a massive season.
And I was going to ask you about Howard, too. I'm a big Cameron Brate fan. I think he is extremely underrated throughout the league. But Howard is just one of those next-level weapons. And what you said, I think, was dead on about athletically and potential-wise. He is right up there with the best of them in the NFL right now. And, again, he could further revolutionize the position. But James, you pointed out too his injury concerns the last 2 years. Are people in Buccaneer land beginning to wonder if this guy is going to put it together from a health aspect and stay on the field for 14, 16 games of the season?
I don't think so. Both of his injuries were relatively fluky. You know, this isn't like a reoccurring injury that he's been dealing with. You know, last year the injury was similar to, you know, he was tackled and the body weight of the defender, I can't remember who it was, came down on his ankle, similar to what we saw with Tyler Eifert from the Bengals. Now, fortunately for the Buccaneers, it wasn't nearly as serious. The ankle didn't break or anything like that, but it was just kind of one of those flukes where it was just, you know, the defender came down, his body weight came on his ankle, and it knocked him out. Now, had the Buccaneers been in a race for a postseason position, I think he would have been able to go towards the end and into the postseason. But at that point, why risk, you know, further injury? You had already seen a couple of players. You saw Quan Alexander and linebacker Jack Sitchie both go out with ACL tears within 5 plays of one another. So at that point, you don't risk it. You just let him sit for the rest of a lost season so that he's ready to go this year. But, you know, as you said, you know, O.J. Howard is that next level guy. We saw, and it's something that we still joke about with one of our reoccurring guests on the show, a wonderful reporter for Buccaneers.com, Carmen Vitale. You know, he is a human mismatch, and we saw him get penalized for offensive pass interference because a defender legitimately ran into him and bounced off. That's how big and strong he is. And it caused the ref to throw a flag because, you know, and I don't need to tell you that refs have problems making calls. But, you know, a lot of these referees, they have to make these split-second decisions. So if you don't see the entire thing develop, all of a sudden you see this you know, 6'6" towering mammoth of a human and a defender laying on the ground, you think, okay, well, that obviously had to be a push. No, he just ran into him and bounced off because OJ Howard is just such a huge individual.
Now, jumping to the defensive side of the ball, you mentioned Quan Alexander, and for those that don't know that are listening, Quan signed a contract with the San Francisco 49ers. He was a thorn in the Saints side for many, many years, one of my favorite linebackers to watch. How big of that is his loss to that defensive side of the ball?
It hurts, and it hurts, I believe, more from a leadership standpoint than it does an on-the-field standpoint. Now, I love Quan. He was personally one of my favorites as well, but he did have shortcomings in his game. He was always a liability in pass coverage. He did have problems with over-pursuing runners and missing tackles. Those are things that he can continue to work on and he can get better at, but for the kind of money that the Niners paid him, and good on him. I'm all for players getting the most they can. It's a very short shelf life in this league, and if you have the opportunity to get paid because you may not get another chance. So good on him. You know, he was balling out and one of the better middle linebackers in the NFL, playing on a fourth rounder's salary with the way that the rookie salary cap is structured. So it does sting a little bit. But I think that's why we hear all the murmurings about how interested the Buccaneers are in Devin White. Would he be the pick at 5? Maybe. I'm not sure if they would be willing to use that kind of draft capital on an inside linebacker. I personally would be fine with it because I see all the things that Devin White can bring to a defense. But I don't think it's going to hurt quite as bad as some fans believe as far as a production standpoint, especially with them shifting to a 3-4 rather than staying with their traditional 4-3.
And I think that shift to the 3-4 is going to benefit a couple of the personnel signings that you guys did have. You lost Quan, but you're bringing in Shaq Barrett, who is an extremely fast pass rushing specialist around the edge, or at least he was with Denver. And you brought in Deon Buchanan, kind of that hybrid type, that in-the-box safety / linebacker. So do you think that the 3-4 personnel benefits the skill set of these two players?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Shaq Barrett is another guy we were fortunate enough to have on our show and talk to for a little while about his signing with the Buccaneers, kind of what spurred it. And something interesting that he said to us was that he knew his time in Denver was up halfway through the 2017 season. He wasn't getting the opportunities that he felt he should. He didn't get the opportunities he felt that his skill set could provide. And so he wanted the opportunity to start somewhere, and he is getting that opportunity in Tampa. So Shaq Barrett is, he's a raw talent. He has, a pretty solid set of skills, but he's not this world beater, at least not yet, because he hasn't been given that opportunity, and now he has the opportunity to start. And as you said, Deon Buchanan coming in as kind of that hybrid guy, that's someone that Bruce Arians is familiar with. It's somebody that Todd Bowles is familiar with, and a guy with the versatility that Todd Bowles is going to use to his advantage. One of the things that we love to hear, and we heard it from Bruce, Todd, and Byron Leftwich, was we don't have a scheme. Our scheme is our players. And for the past few years, whether it's been Greg Schiano, Lovie Smith, or Dirk Cutter, the problem that we've seen is this whole round hole square peg thing where they're trying to force guys to do things they're not comfortable with. Take a look at Noah Spence. Noah Spence came into the NFL as someone who was supposed to be a pretty feared pass rusher, but he was a 3-4 outside linebacker, and the Bucs, basically made him gain about 20 pounds and put his hand in the dirt. Well, that negated his skills. That ruined, the player that he was. So to hear coaches say that, they have these playbooks as thick as the New York City phone book, and they're going to scheme around the strengths of their players, that's something we've been dying to see. And it's something that we've seen Bruce do with other teams. So it's not just lip service.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And one of Arian's feathers in his cap, if you will, is the fact that he is a player's coach. So and he has such a good eye for talent, really, on both sides of the ball. So I'll be very interested to see the jump that Tampa has in their results based off of their personnel, because for the last few years, especially at the skill set positions and in that defensive front seven, they are as talented as anybody. But that brings me to the question that I think everybody is asking, or at least wondering about. What's going on with Gerald McCoy? Is he going to be a Buccaneer this year? And how does the defensive alignment switch benefit or hurt him?
I don't think he's back. And I say that, it's so funny that fans of teams can be so divided on a certain player that, we talk to people that cover these other teams, and we tell them that there is a large group of Buccaneers fans that hate Gerald McCoy. And I don't use that term lightly. They legitimately despise this guy because they think he's soft. They think he disappears late in games, and that, they're worried about him smiling and having a good time and what he's talking about on social media, that they don't take into account exactly what he can do. I personally am not one of those guys. I do like Gerald McCoy a lot. However, this is a 31-year-old defensive tackle who has, not had double-digit sacks ever in his career. Not that I fully expect him to. He's not Warren Sapp, which so many want him to be. But carrying a $13 million price tag and being owed $37 million over the next 3 years, you can't pay a guy that kind of money for the kind of production that he brings in. Yes, he does help the guys around him. He's one of the reasons that Jason Pierre-Paul was able to get those double-digit sacks. He was one of the reasons that Carl Nassib was so good. But that's why they have Vita Vea now. And Vita Vea fits better in this 3-4 scheme. And I realized that, the coaching staff and the GM and Gerald himself had said, if you can play ball, you can play ball. Well, yeah, that's true. But going back to my Noah Spence point, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. You can't make somebody that they're not. And I think the Bucs are, they're not forced to do anything right now, which is why McCoy is technically still on the team. But if one of these teams wants to draft an Ed Oliver or a Quinnen Williams or a Christian Wilkins or somebody like that, and they miss out, they might be willing to part with a day 3 pick to bring in Gerald McCoy if they can fit him under the cap. So until the draft is over, the Bucs really don't have to do anything. They can trade him that weekend, or they can outright release him. But, this is a guy who has never missed a minute of anything inside this facility, and he didn't show up to these off-season workouts that they just held a few weeks ago. He was one of, if not the only, no-show. So it's pretty much a foregone conclusion, in my opinion, that Gerald McCoy's time in Tampa is over.
Well, I think Drew Brees and Saints offensive linemen would disagree with your fan base that Gerald McCoy is soft. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens with him. I kind of agree with you based off of what I know and what I've seen. I would be surprised to see McCoy back on the field for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season.
Can I ask a question, Bob?
Yeah.
My thing about Gerald McCoy, and after watching Hard Knocks, I thought his locker room presence was really something that solidified that whole organization. If he is a departure from the team, who are the team leaders at the Buccaneers, especially on defense?
Well, you would definitely look to a guy like Levante David. He's going to be a leader, but he and Gerald were similar in the fact that they were more of that Derek Brooks style of leader rather than that Warren Sapp. It was the Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber school of leadership, where it was follow my lead. I'm not gonna give you a pep talk. I'm not going to get in your face and scream at you. Follow my example, because I'm going to be out here busting my butt and doing things right. So that's kind of Levante's way of doing things. I think if Jason Pierre-Paul stays on the roster, which, there haven't been very many murmurings about moving on from him, but he does carry a very large cap hit. and the Bucs may be forced to kind of move on from him a little bit sooner than they thought. They can get out of it now with no dead money. But, Jason Pierre-Paul is more of that brash, loud, kind of in-your-face leader. There were reports at the end of the season that he was ripping into some guys, in the locker room and calling them fake and really getting after them. So you look to the veteran leadership of a Levante and of a Jason Pierre-Paul. I think Carl Nassib, he's been through some tough times and he's gonna be a leader. Really not a whole lot in the secondary unless you're going to look to Vernon Hargreaves, who's entering his fourth year, but he's also missed most of the last 2 years with injury. So you have that issue there. And that's another reason that I kind of gravitate towards a guy like Devin White. Devin White, even walking in as a rookie, he is going to command that locker room. That is his personality. That is his style. And he's not going to be afraid to step in and immediately become the quarterback of that defense. And whether you're a veteran or a rookie, just like him, he's going to tell you what you need to do, what you're screwing up on, and how you have to get better, or he's going to chase you off of his football field.
James, we've highlighted your free agent signings, and I think you guys have made some really interesting moves. But you're in possession of the 5th overall pick from the first round and the 39th overall pick, early second round pick. Where do you think the team goes with each of those selections?
Well, at number 5, I think the obvious choice, if he falls to them, which I don't think he will, but we've seen some crazy things happen in the draft, Quinnen Williams is the slam dunk no-brainer. Now, I think if he's gone, which I expect him to be, they're going to have an internal conversation about Devin White at 5. And I won't repeat what I've already said. Again, number 5 inside linebacker, that may be a tough sell. I think Jason Light is going to try to do exactly what he's done the past 2 years, and he's going to try to trade back, add some draft capital. From what I've been told, they really want to add a second rounder in this draft, at least one. So you could look for some movement and add a second rounder because they like the depth at some of these other positions. So if you're looking at them to slide back, you're looking at guys like Devin Bush, Ed Oliver, Montez Sweat, Cleveland Farrell, Christian Wilkins, these Brian Burns is another one. These kind of impact guys in the front 7. Then you look at the second round, and that's where you're able to find some of these starting caliber secondary players. You could see Deontay Thompson out of Alabama slip to the second round. You got Rock Ya-Sin, the corner out of Temple. I know that they really like him a lot. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the corner from Penn State, but I know he's another guy that they really like a lot. So I think you're going to see defense for sure in the first 2 rounds, possibly even all of the first 2 days of this draft, trying to help fortify the front 7 and really help out the back end of that defense. Because right now you're starting outside corners. You have Carlton Davis and you have Vernon Hargreaves. Your safeties, you have third-year Justin Evans, second-year Jordan Whitehead. There's definitely room for improvement there, and this is a great draft to be able to snag starting caliber players in day 2 at corner and safety.
Oh, for sure. James, you've given us some great stuff tonight, and we appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule. I know we're all extremely busy this time of year. But hey, we have to do this again soon. We can't wait almost another year to have you back on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was happy to do it. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, for sure. Tell our listeners how they can find you and how they can tune into your podcast.
Yeah, it's myself and David Harrison. We host the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And for those of you that are really ramping up for the draft, if you're unaware, go ahead and whatever your favorite podcatcher is, search Locked On NFL. And what they've done is they've put together a full mock draft, each team represented by the hosts of that particular show. There's an experts desk where they analyze each pick in between. It's just like the NFL draft. It's been broken up over a few episodes because they run about an hour long, but you're going to get a full first-round mock with instant analysis. It was really a lot of fun to put together. David and I, of course, are also over at BucsNation.com, the Buccaneers SB Nation page. We do a lot of work over there. And you can find me on Twitter at JYarcho, that's YARCHO _Bucs. And I also run at Bucs_Nation.
Awesome.
James, we thank you so much again for being on. You guys enjoy the draft. I'm sure we will be messaging each other back and forth. I know David and I usually do about our team's picks too. But we were thrilled that you took a couple minutes out for us tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know. Thanks so much, guys.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Well, Saints fans, if you're tuning in late, we have been experiencing some technical difficulties and a little bit behind time-wise, but that was James Yarcho from Locked on Bucs, and we appreciate him taking a couple minutes out. But to continue our NFC South Steel Cage match, it is our honor to welcome Mr. Dave Holcomb from the Falcon Maven. Are you on the line with us, Dave?
Yes. How are you guys doing tonight?
Oh, real good. How about yourself?
Oh, very good.
Dave, it's a busy time of year for all of us, as we just mentioned. And I know you guys are going out of your mind over there in Atlanta, too, with what you think the team is going to do and then, of course, what they actually do. But give us your impressions of the Falcons' off-season moves thus far.
You know, all things considered, I believe they've positioned themselves to be better during the 2019 season. The Falcons didn't come in to the offseason with very much salary cap space. That's been a big storyline for them throughout the winter. So they really haven't been able to make any big splashes, but they added Adrian Claiborne last week, stole defensive tackle Tyler Davison from you guys. And I think Falcons fans like that, just taking a good player from a division rival. That was a good sign. And they added two big guards in James Carpenter and Jamin Brown, guys that are expected to start inside and allow the Falcons coaching staff to do what they've been saying all off season is we want to get back to balance on our offense and run the ball more. They have two maulers at guard now that will enable them to do that. So even though they didn't have much money to use and they haven't really added household names, the Falcons' two biggest needs were offensive line, defensive line, and they've been able to address the trenches with those four guys.
Now, you lost a couple of big names, though, in the offseason, in the secondary, Justin Bethel and Robert Alford. And then, at running back, you lost Tevin Coleman. What's going to be the biggest loss this team has to overcome or hole that has yet to be filled?
It's hard to say until the draft happens, but I think right now I would say Tevin Coleman, because if for some reason Devontae Freeman goes down again, and when we know Freeman hasn't been the most healthy back over the last couple of seasons, if anything happens to Freeman, there really is no insurance policy behind him. The Falcons have Ito Smith, who I think showed some signs of being a capable backup, but very unproven, obviously. And if Freeman misses substantial time like last year, there is no one like Coleman that they can turn to, at least not, heading into the draft. Maybe they address that with the draft, but I think that's the hole right now, that if Freeman went down, they were going to be in big trouble because they wouldn't be able to have that balanced offensive attack.
Right. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, we mentioned Alford and Bethel, and you also lost Brian Poole. How do you feel like their secondary is shaped up to look right now? Before, and I'm assuming they're probably going to add a secondary player or two. But how does the depth chart on that back end look to you right now?
I think it looks okay. I agree with you. They need to add another guy in the draft. I don't think it'll be in the first round, but in one of the first 3 rounds, I think they will add a cornerback. They have high expectations for Isaiah Oliver, who was second round pick last year. So they're kind of hoping he fills the Robert Alford hole. And if he's able to do that, and they add another rookie, I think they're pretty solid in the back end. The big thing though also is they're counting on their safeties who suffered pretty significant injuries last year, guys, to come back and be the players they were before those injuries. And that is a little bit risky, because are they going to be just as good as they were? Does it take them a little bit of time to do that? Are they going to hit the ground running right in September? I would probably say no, but are they going to be back to close to where they were by October, November? That is to be, I think we have to wait and see on that.
Which Matt Ryan are we going to see in 2019? Last year, at least I thought he was pretty uneven. I mean, he still put up some nice numbers, but fairly inconsistent, especially in the clutch. Or is it going to be closer to the 2017 league MVP Matt Ryan?
I think it could be much closer to the MVP Matt Ryan. I think it depends on how the players play around him. He got sacked 42 times last year. That was the most since 2013. So I think if the Falcons are able to protect him a little bit better, establish a better running game, if Devontae Freeman is healthy, then you could definitely see a Matt Ryan closer to how he played in 2016. But if it's only him, if it's only a passing attack, then it probably be closer to last year.
Now, with the injuries that this team had last year, I mean, their safety position was ravaged, and Saints fans can certainly relate with what it's like to have injuries riddled throughout the secondary. And you were out without Devontae Freeman for an extended period of time, struggles along the offensive line. Having said all that, a lot of people were still both disappointed and surprised by the Falcons' 7-9 finish last year. Do you expect a rebound, or was there something else up with this team last year other than the injuries?
I expect a rebound. I think you can contribute most of their struggles from last season to those injuries. I mean, you mentioned the safeties being a big concern, and the running game, again, the lack of balance on offense. I think the one thing that they might be missing, though, and Falcons fans themselves are even wondering, are we good enough in this area, is the pass rush. They didn't get after the quarterback like they did 2 years ago when they, in 2016 when they went to the Super Bowl. And a big part of that was Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley's had a couple very disappointing years, and the team picked up his fifth-year option. And I really think Dan Quinn is tying his tenure with the Falcons to Beasley and him having a really big fifth season. So that to me is a big that to me is the thing that maybe was missing last year, and maybe they're still missing. Who's the guy that's going to supply the pass rush?
Now, you mentioned Beasley, and the team did pick up their fifth-year option, which surprised some. Do you expect him to finally really get it? I mean, he certainly has shown flashes of potential, but very inconsistent and lower all-around productivity than what a lot of people, and certainly what the Falcons, I would think, would expect. Do you expect him to put it all together this year?
I'm hopeful that he will. To me, you don't have the type of season that Beasley had a couple years ago if you're not extremely talented. 15.5 sacks, led the league, was all pro his second year, and then just 10 sacks since in two seasons. It's really hard to comprehend. And I think the Falcons are doing their best to kind of take pressure away from him, not have him be the sole guy that needs to supply the pass rush, and I think that's why adding back Adrian Claiborne is a big addition. And and getting somebody else in the draft that can help the pass rush and give opponents somebody else to game plan for. And then you have Beasley maybe getting more one-on-ones as opposed to getting double teamed like he has mostly been the last 2 years. So to answer your question, it's a concern for sure. I'm not sure that I can say with full confidence, yes, he's going to put it together this year, because we've seen more, average play from Beasley at this point than all pro play. But we're certainly hopeful in Atlanta that it will finally come together for Beasley in 2019.
Now, on the offensive side of the ball, your top pick last year was Calvin Ridley, the receiver out of Alabama. He had what I thought was a wonderful rookie year, absolutely tortured the Saints in their first meeting. Do you expect even bigger things from him this year? I mean, did they kind of limit the playbook for him last year? Because at times it sort of seemed like it.
I think the big thing for me with Ridley was towards the end of the year, he seemed to hit the rookie wall just a little bit. Games against Baltimore and Green Bay, both were losses. Both were during that 5-game losing streak for the Falcons towards the end of it, and kind of put an end to their season, really. At that point, had just 3 catches against Baltimore and then just 1 catch against Green Bay. And came on strong towards the end of the season with a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. But I think Falcons fans want to see more consistency from Ridley all around. And I do think that by the end of the year, we'll be talking about him being the number 2 guy behind Julio Jones and kind of moving Mohamed Sanu to that 3rd role. And as Ridley matures and becomes more of a go-to guy in 2019.
How comfortable do they feel with their tight ends? They have Austin Hooper, who's given the team some nice passing game production, and then re-signed Logan Paulson. But this draft class looks pretty deep at the tight end position. Do you kind of look for the Falcons to add somebody there, or do they feel pretty comfortable with what they have?
I think they feel pretty confident with who they have. And they, in addition to bringing back Paulson, they also signed Luke Stalker and Eric Sauerbert this offseason. So they're pretty stacked at tight end. If they bring in another rookie, it would be kind of a 5th guy to compete with those other 4. And you're not going to have 5 tight ends on the final roster. So right. I understand maybe the need in case you think Hooper isn't going to come back. Hooper's going to be a unrestricted free agent next winter, and if you're already thinking down the line, hey, Hooper's not going to be with us in a year, we need to bring in a new rookie to kind of mentor for a year and be ready to start in 2020. That makes sense, but with the other guys they've added this offseason, I just don't think there's room to add another tight end in the draft.
Now, how about an offensive line? We saw Matt's protection break down at times last year. And we know like you mentioned earlier, they brought in 2 guards in James Carpenter and Jamon Brown. Do you expect them to look into maybe adding a tackle fairly early in the draft, or how do you guys feel about what you have outside?
For sure. A tackle is definitely a spot that they need to address with one of the top 2 picks, I'd say, in the draft, the 1st round or the 2nd round. This offseason has been all about the trenches, really, for the Falcons, and I would not at all be surprised if the 1st round they take a defensive lineman and the 2nd round they take an offensive tackle, or vice versa. And that spot that's remaining to address on the offensive line is right tackle. I think it sounds like they're confident that Ty Zambrano can start if need be at right tackle. But in a perfect world, I don't think you want Zambrano to be your starter. You want him to be your swing tackle to start if you have an injury somewhere on the offensive line. Zambrano can also start at guard. So he's a good 6th offensive lineman to have. I would prefer, I think the Falcons would prefer to have a different starter at right tackle. So for sure, if the defensive linemen that they like are gone by number 14, they take I think they'll definitely take a right tackle at number 14, and he probably will start right away.
And you kind of stole my thunder with my next question. You guys are sitting at number 14 in the first round, and you have the 45th overall pick in the second round. What are some of the names that you hear thrown about, or we're all doing mock drafts this time of year? You mentioned right tackle, but what are some of the other positions or names that you could see this team going for?
Well, it's really all defensive linemen in the first round or offensive tackles. If a guy like Montez Sweat fell, or Ed Oliver had been real popular picks, if they fell to 14, I think the Falcons would be ecstatic. There was a rumor out there that the Falcons are interested in trading up to get Ed Oliver. I don't know how much I buy into that rumor, but those are two names right off the bat. Brian Burns has been connected to Atlanta, defensive end from Florida State. Clinton Farrell, Christian Wilkins from Clemson. And on the offensive line, pretty much any top tackle that you can think of. Jonah Williams, Jalen Taylor. One mock draft today from AtlantaFalcons.com had Andre Dillard from Washington State, the tackle, connected to Atlanta at 14. I think that would be an excellent pick for them. So it's all trenches, guys, with defensive linemen and offensive tackles.
Yeah, no doubt. Although I will tell you, you guys have an extremely underrated defensive tackle in Tyler Davison. He joins the infamous list of Bobby Hebert, Joe Horn, Morton Anderson, and now Tyler Davison of Saints that became Falcons. If you talk to Tyler, tell him I love him, but tell him I might erase his autograph from my 2015 training camp helmet that he signed. No, you guys are getting a good one now.
I'll make sure to mention that to him. But it'll be interesting to see if, in the last couple of weeks, I mentioned again that they added Davison and Claiborne, if that changes their draft strategy at all, if that makes them go offensive tackle in the first round. Because Davison and Claiborne are signed to just one-year deals. So I'm not sure adding them means that you go away from defensive line in the first round, because you might have a big hole there again next offseason. But for 2019, I think Davison is a very underrated addition, and Claiborne is as well. So I think either way, a tackle or a defensive lineman is the biggest need.
Is Dan Quinn on the hot seat if this team misses the playoffs again?
I think for sure. Especially the way I mentioned already, he's tied himself kind of to Vic Beasley. He's taken him under his wing and is going to this summer. If Beasley doesn't have a good season, and if the narrative is the Falcons missed the playoffs because they didn't have a pass rush, then Quinn is definitely on the hot seat.
And I'd agree with that. I mean, he came in with the resume of a defensive coach anyway. So I can see that to be true. And I don't, the NFL schedule show was coming on as we were getting ready to come on the air. So I don't know if it's official. But I think we've all seen the schedule leaks all day, and it looks like you guys will be hosting us for another Thanksgiving get-together between two so friendly rivals.
Right, yeah. Yes. Maybe they should make this a tradition. You've got Detroit and you got Dallas, and then maybe just every other year, you switch back and forth between New Orleans hosting the Falcons and the Falcons hosting the Saints.
I would love to see that, and I kind of suggested that to one of my Twitter followers when they commented on the holiday get together too, because and feel free to disagree with me. I think that this is by far the most underrated rivalry, not only in the NFL but maybe most of sports, is Falcons versus Saints.
I'm new to covering the Falcons, relatively new. I started at Falcon Maven in January, and I've been very impressed with the rivalry between the Falcons and Saints. It's probably my number one impression so far of the Falcon fan base, how much they dislike the New Orleans Saints. Because you're right, it's not a rivalry that is mentioned much on the national stage, and it probably should be, because it is a pretty intense and pretty good rivalry.
Yeah, there's no question. And I'm like you. I grew up a Saints fan, but I've only been covering the team with Kyle and our other outstanding media outlets for a few years now. But listeners, Dave and I are kind of kindred spirits too, because we're both from Pittsburgh, PA.
Yeah.
You escaped. I'm still stuck. So we're both kind of smarting from the Penguins' sweep at the hands of the New York Islanders. But we're feeling each other's pain tonight, and we're more focused on football than I think hockey at this time of year.
Turn the page to the Pirates, which I think is not the best of pages to turn to, but also turning to the NFL draft, because that'll take my mind off of hockey.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm always interested to see what our competitors through the South does in the draft. I certainly keep my eye on it in free agency. But Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you on tonight. Sorry about the delay and all the technical difficulties, but hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. Tell our listeners how they can find you and your work.
Yeah, check us out at footballmaven.io, or you can just really easy in Google search Falcon Maven, and we should be one of the first search terms. And you can follow me on Twitter at DM Holcomb.
All right, that was Dave Holcomb of the Falcon Maven, excuse me. Dave, have yourself a great night, and I'm sure we'll be chatting back and forth about each other's draft picks.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay. Take care.
Kyle, we had a couple of great, that was, considering the blood feuds between everybody in the NFC South, I think our round trip through the South the last couple of weeks has been fun, friendly, and definitely cordial.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. Right now.
Yeah, that's easy to expect, especially with the years that everybody's anticipating. I think people are anxious still to see what's going to happen with the draft. But if you look at the NFC South and the way they are positioned, each one of these squads are really retooling, refocusing their efforts. Still have some questions about what's going to happen down in Tampa. I don't know how much of an influence Arians can really make on the team as a whole. I love Arians as a coach. Let me just say that right now. I think the world of him because he's such a big presence, and I was happy that he had finally gotten his opportunity when he stepped in as interim coach in Indy before going to Arizona and becoming coach of the year. That was just an excellent job that he did, especially with the unfortunate way he departed from Pittsburgh. But one thing I got to say, man, is that when you look at the South, and of course we're partial, I think we still have the best 4 teams in the conference, and I think we have the more unique rivalries going on. People can say that the Dallas Cowboys, Redskins, that's not much of a rivalry these days, The Eagles, Cowboys, okay. You got Bears, Packers, okay. But there's not really much of a really hated, deep-seething hate that goes on in the NFC or the NFL than the Saints and Falcons, But I think it's also due to the admiration that we do have for the franchises as well. You got to respect a guy like Matt Ryan. You got to respect Cam Newton. Is Jameis going to rise up to that level? Still a work in progress. So, look, let's talk about the schedule, Bob, while we have a few minutes before we get off the air. What are your thoughts initially?
I mean, just like we talked about with Davis as we were ending his interview, there have been schedule leaks out all day, and when it finally looked like what was being leaked was going to be accurate, I think the Saints have a really heavy schedule to start the year. Now you can only go by last year's records, which really means nothing, as you know, once the games start to get played. But they start out with a playoff team at home, with Houston, and then the rematch with Los Angeles, with the Rams on the road. I'm a little bit surprised. Okay, I'm a lot surprised that the NFL chose week 2, for that rematch. I would have expected that if it wasn't going to be an opening week, it was going to be around mid-season or down the stretch and on prime time. So I was a little bit surprised at that. I think the Saints have a total of 5 primetime games, which they've earned. They usually, only the league's elite get 4 or 5 primetime games, so the Saints have certainly earned that. But yeah, judging off last year's records, it really looks like the league, the NFL, hammered the Saints to begin with, and then a couple of back-to-back tough road trips down the stretch as well. What are your feelings on it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. The Houston game is not going to be a cakewalk in no means, right? J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, Deshaun Watson, those guys coming into the Superdome, they're going to be eager themselves. This is going to be the first really all off season that Deshaun Watson had an opportunity to prepare for with his team and his squad in his 3rd season. So that's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be a challenge, and I hope the Saints take it as that, especially their defense. But going into LA, the second game, I thought that was how do I say this? NFL not utilizing their ratings abilities to the hilt, right? Because I would have thought somebody in that front office would have said, we've got to have these guys when it comes down to the stretch, because people are going to want to see this game.
Mm-hmm.
That was a weird one, but it could play very, very well into the Saints' hands, because sometimes when you have a losing team, those first few games, losers from the Super Bowl, those first few games are kind of touch and go for those guys. You know, they're not going to be at full capacity defensively. I think Sue is not going to sign with those guys, right? They lost some players offensively as well. So I think that's a battle the Saints can possibly still come out and win. The Dallas game is interesting too, man. I was like, why would they have that one, the 3rd game of the season as well, man? I just think the NFL missed a whole lot of ratings potential to be able to have those type of important games coming down the stretch versus up front, loading up front. But it gives this team an opportunity to see who we have and what we are about those first 3 games. And if we're able to, let's say, come out 2-1, that'll be great. I just think the fans are going to have to be a little bit realistic those first 4 games of the season, instead of thinking we're going to be 4-0. I just think let's be a little bit realistic. 2-2 would be great, but when we have a stretch, man, and that back end when you have all the NFC games, I think we played the Falcons 2 times in 3 weeks again, or 4 weeks, something like that, kind of similar to what they've been doing to us with the Falcons the past couple of years. It's going to be one of those seasons you just got to grin and bear it. This is your schedule. Go play it.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you and I were telling people last year, when everybody wanted to write off the season because of how tough the Saints schedule was, and they faced 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 teams from the year before that had went to the playoffs. Look, every season is different. And the Saints know what every other NFL team has to offer. They call it, the saying is anything can happen on any given Sunday for a reason, because you have to go out there and play the games. How many teams do we look at on a year-to-year basis that qualified for the playoffs the year before that do not do so in the following year? So there is constant changeover. And I know you break down, as analysts, you and I break down the NFL schedule pretty similarly. We do it kind of in quarter portions. And just looking at it, okay, it looks daunting when you look at the Saints' first 4 or 5 games. But this team knows what they need to do to take care of business. And we can now say they've been there before, after 2 straight, Super Bowl runs. Their focus is on the end prize, but they know that the only way to get to that end game is to win every individual battle from week to week. And they know that. The thing that concerns me about opening up with Houston is, like you said, all the defensive star power that the Texans have. And we know we're talking about a 40-year-old quarterback who every time he gets hit at this stage in his career, most of us Saints fans just cringe. And yeah, Drew can take a beating. But again, you don't want your quarterback to take a beating. So that offensive line better hold up and hold up quickly.
Here's the thing. You have a healthier J.J. Watt this season, right? You have a Clowney who I think they franchised him, so he's making a whole big bunch of money. He's got to prove himself this season, right? The problem with Houston is they lost Kareem Jackson and they lost a couple of other guys that were in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
They still don't have a guy opposite Hopkins. Fuller is going to have to come back from that significant injury he had, right? Demario Thomas, they shipped off, and he's now signed with the Patriots, but he's not going to be any good until probably week 10, 11, or 12 for the Patriots, with the significant injury he had. So Houston still has a lot of question marks. They still don't really know what they're going to do at running back. Foreman comes back, for those guys. Alfred Blue is no longer there in the supporting, role. So Houston still has a lot of holes to fill in what's going to be their identity. So I believe that game is going to be a challenging game. The first couple of quarters, if the Saints are able to be consistent and sustain themselves, they should be able to win it. Now, if you talk about L.A., Cowboys, Seahawks, those are the games right there. We've got to win at least 2 of those because you can't have a deficit in the NFC, right? Because those teams are potentially going to be vying for playoff spots themselves, right? So that's pretty interesting how that's going to be set up for that first quarter of the season for the Saints.
Yeah,
I think we still can do well, like you said,
mm-hmm.
but it's just going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and the most important thing, like you said, you want to win every game, but you really, really want to need to win the games against A, your divisional rivals, and B, your conference rivals. Because 2 years ago, we saw how that kind of played out. The Saints had a wonderful regular season, but dropped a couple games that would wind up costing them in the tiebreaker. Therefore, putting them not only in the wild card round, but then on, as a result, on the road in the divisional playoffs. Last year, it was kind of the opposite. The Saints really controlled their own destiny. They and the Rams both They kind of ran away with the conference, and it was a battle between those two teams while everybody else was in their rearview mirror for the number one spot. And then both teams, as we know, ultimately earned a bye. So if you look at it that way, I got to assume that the Seahawks will probably be in playoff contention. You definitely are going to assume that the Rams and Bears are going to be compete for the top of the heap again. The Saints play road games against the Rams, road games against the Bears and Seahawks, and then have the Cowboys at home, who I would believe would certainly be in the mix too. So as far as marquee matchups and must-win games outside of your division, you got to highlight those games. And what we just list 5 of them. You need to go 3-2, 4-1, ideally. Statistically, we expect maybe one of those teams that we just mentioned to fall off a bit, but you can't count on that. Again, you can only go by last year's record, and coming into this season, you sort of assume who's going to be near the top of the heap, and those are the games that you're going to want to circle and label as close to must-win games.
Every home game should be a win.
Yep.
Right there. Rams, we can win that game. Seahawks, I know Russell, you and your Bay Sierra got that big, huge contract. But the Seahawks, their defense, you saw toward the end of the year, they started to really gel, that young defense, right?
Yeah, they did.
But have they still put some pieces in place other than Lockett and Baldwin to be able to help him out in the wide receiving core? That's going to be a thing for the Seahawks, and I know they have that young, talented running back there. So those are some battles that we're going to face. But if you want to be considered the top team in the National Football League, those are the battles you got to win anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay?
and not only at home but on the road.
Yeah. I look at this year, man, and everybody knows this. If a team comes out at least 3-1 after that first quarter, they're more likely going to reach the playoffs. We know this statistically, right? I think it's 75% chance. It goes up from there. Of course, the more wins you have on the board, especially that second quarter. But how we perform the third quarter of the year when we start getting into, I like to say, our core subjects, which is the NFC South, that's the really telltale sign of how the Saints are going to do. So I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I think it's going to be a dynamic year for the team. It's going to be a dynamic year for the fans. We get to see some really good football up front in the Superdome with the Texans and Cowboys, just to name a few, of course. I would love to go see the Saints in Atlanta play on Thanksgiving. That should be a pretty good bang-up game as well. But, look, man, nevertheless, Saints, do your job, do what we need to do, and we'll be okay.
Yep, completely agreed.
All right, Bob, got to run. Tell everybody how they can follow you on the internet and World Wide Web.
Well, first of all, we want to thank Dave Holcomb from the Falcon Maven and James Yarcho from Locked On Bucs, as well as Tony Dunn, again, from the C3 podcast, and helping us do our kind of a NFC South steel cage matchup while we lead up to the draft. Love all you guys. Can't wait to have you on again. But as far as following me, folks, you can do so on my individual accounts, either on Facebook at Bob Rose or Twitter at BobbyR2613. My work is through the Canal Street Chronicles, which is on Facebook, Canal Street Chronicles, or Twitter at Saint CSC. We are churning out draft profiles as fast as we can. Tune in tomorrow morning. I think John Hendricks and a couple of our other writers are going to do a quick Saints schedule breakdown, so that's going to be a fine read there. And I'm going crazy with college prospects and trying to do draft profiles like crazy. I'm having dreams about them, Kyle. That's not good. But if you haven't already
dreams are
joined,
good, as long as you don't have nightmares, Bob.
Well,
dreams
true.
are good. No nightmares.
Again, we talked to him last week, the great Mike Detillier. He does this 365 days a year, 366 on a leap year. I do it for a few weeks a year. Well, most of us do it for a few weeks a year as far as really concentrating on it. So I don't know how that man does it. Props to him. And if you missed our show with Mike last week, please go, either Saints News Network or the Spreaker app to download last week's episode, as you can listen to all of our past shows via both of those outlets or through the Bayou Blitz Facebook page as well. We want to thank, and I know I speak for Kyle too, we want to thank you guys for the contributions you've given, not only to the Bayou Blitz Facebook page, but all the Saints news media outlets. But if you aren't already a member of that page, send Kyle or I a join request. We want to have you as a member of our family. There's some outstanding people in there, some really good dialogue, and we try to keep our family updated as far as breaking news and breaking news stories there. So stay tuned to that. But nothing but love for you. Thank you for all your support. And we're looking forward to a fun off season too.
Definitely. And next week, man, get ready. The final report going into the draft. Looking forward to it. And I think it's going to be a really, really good season for us in the black and gold and in the Who Dat Nation for 2019-2020. Okay, this is Kyle T. Mosley. Don't forget, check us out at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com with Barry Hurstis and all of his featured columns. And you can check us out at saintspodcast.com to listen to all of the podcasts within the Who Dat Nation from not only ourselves, but the guys at Canal Street Chronicles, and as well as some of the other guys that post some pretty neat video blogs, and as well as our boys over at the Allen and our boys over there at the the Dome?
Under the Dome.
Under the Dome, right. All right, so check them out. All right, guys, Kyle T. Mosley here, signing off with Mr. Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz and Canal Street Chronicle. Take care. Have a good one. Who Dat Nation. Have a safe Easter. Have fun with your family. Come back to us safe and sound next Wednesday night. And Tiger Woods, congratulations, man.
Congrats.
Who Dat, baby. Take care. Bye.